Hello, welcome everyone to Tea with TPS. Today, our program is entitled Return of the Native, because our distinguished guest today is Mr. Venu Rajamony, who has just left the Foreign Service, having lived in many countries abroad, and has chosen to come back home to Trivandrum, where he was born and where he was educated in schooling. And then later he moved to Kochi to Maharaja's College, the Law College, then moved to Delhi to study international relations and served in the Foreign Service with distinction for 34 years. Very few diplomats come back home to Kerala, though there are plenty of them in the Foreign Service. So he belongs to that distinguished group of about 4 or 5 people who have decided to settle in Kerala after leaving the Foreign Service. There may be different personal reasons for this, but I think many of our colleagues prefer to live in Delhi so that they can continue more or less the same kind of lifestyle. I came back because I was attracted by the role model of Sri KPS Menon Jr., who left Delhi the evening of his retirement day and remained in Trivandrum except for his occasional trip outside. The other person who came to Trivandrum and lived here was Ambassador Thomas Abraham. Both of them have left this life. And now Trivandrum, I call it a one ambassador town. So I'm very happy that now we have a 2 ambassador town in Trivandrum with Venu Rajamony joining us. We could discuss politics, but since this is your introduction to Trivandrum, as it were, we would talk more about you and your experience in the Foreign Service. This morning, I heard an interview given by our very distinguished and revered colleague, Ambassador Chinmaya Garakhan, to some junior Foreign Service officers. So when they asked him how come he chose the Foreign Service, he had a very interesting answer. He said he qualified for the IAS and the IFS. He was not very sure which one to join. So his father told him, go and meet Morarji Desai, who was at that time finance minister, because they're all Gujaratis. So he went there, he got an interview very fast, and he told Morarji that this is what my father wants. He wants your advice on what I should do. He said, very simple. He wants to if you want to serve the nation, join the IAS. If you want to enjoy yourself, join the Foreign Service. So apparently Morarji Desai met him later in Cairo. And when he saw him, he said, oh, you decided to enjoy yourself. So this is an interesting story. So which one was it that prompted you to join the Foreign Service?
Well, I think my beginning and my entry into the Foreign Service perhaps was a little simpler, more logical and more straightforward. But I do have a similar story to share about how I ended up learning Chinese language, which I will come to, where another distinguished Malayali diplomat is involved. But to begin with, I studied political science for my undergraduate studies in Kerala, in Maharaja's College, Ernakulam. And once I studied political science, it was very clear to me that the most interesting, the most exciting aspect of political science for me was international relations. And then when I looked around as to where I could pursue my studies in international relations, the most obvious choice was Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, right, which then and even now remains premier institution in the field of international studies. So I did BA Political Science, then I did an MA in International Studies. And when you go to Delhi, when you go to an institution like Jawaharlal Nehru University, everyone is doing the civil services. In fact, civil services itself was not my only option. I come from a distinguished family of lawyers.
Lawyers, yes.
My grandfather was a lawyer.
And you did law also. You did law also in between.
That's right. So my father would have loved to see me as a lawyer, join him in his practice and to succeed him in his practice in a way.
And you could inherit his library and so on, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. And you have a brother who is doing law, right?
No, I don't have a brother who's doing law. Unfortunately, I have a sister and a brother-in-law who have studied law, who also are not lawyers. But my son, my younger son, has just become a lawyer. So someone is maintaining and continuing that tradition.
Okay.
So I did MA International Studies. The logical follow-up of a study of international studies was diplomacy, was the foreign service. Everybody around me was writing civil service exams. I wanted to test myself and see if I could also do it. And I came back for a variety of reasons, I needed to come back to Cochin at that point of time. So I joined the Ernakulam Law College. I got a job with the Indian Express. I became staff correspondent of the Indian Express. And simultaneously with Indian Express and with study of law, I did my civil services exams and qualified. The first time I qualified to the postal service, and I was very clear that I was not interested in the service. The second time I clearly qualified into the foreign service. I was also the topper from Kerala in that batch. I was the topper of the foreign service batch. So when I opted for foreign service, one more person got a chance to come to Kerala Kada. My friends from the IAS were very happy that I vacated a slot for them and permitted them to come to the state. So I was very clear right from the beginning that if it was civil services, if it was foreign service, I had other options of law or even journalism to an extent, because I worked as a journalist and enjoyed that profession for 2.5 years. But foreign service was very clear in my mind. The story I wanted to mention was the day I joined foreign ministry, the first choice I was confronted with was what language to take, what language to study. And in school in Trivandrum in St. Joseph's, I had studied some amount of French, which I thought already gave me, I have to confess, it was terribly Malayalam accented French. And it is French as is taught in Trivandrum in a school. So I thought with French, I should learn Spanish, and between French, Spanish and English, I could conquer the world. And by chance, at a wedding reception, the day I joined the Foreign Service, I ran into Mr. A.K. Damodaran, who is a very distinguished diplomat also from Kerala with deep roots in Kerala and great knowledge of Malayalam and Sanskrit. And I discussed this with Mr. Damodaran, and he told me, young man, you'll be very foolish to take a language like Spanish. Spanish you can learn very easily with about 6 months of study if you are ever posted to a Spanish-speaking country. But when the government sends you to learn a language, choose the most difficult one, choose one of the most difficult ones. Don't go for an easy option. And that really stuck in my mind, and I said, okay, the most difficult language for an Indian to learn is Chinese. The most important country for an Indian from the perspective of our neighborhood is China. Whether we have good relations or bad relations, China will always remain important. And therefore, I went on to learn Chinese and to learn it well, I would say, in the years.
Well, there is another reason. Chinese is the only language in which Foreign Service has some expertise. You are not the only one. There are several colleagues of ours who speak Chinese like a native. So that's why I advised my brother when his turn came. He's just 1 year senior to you. And I told him that this is the reputation that the ministry has. If you are a Chinese expert, then you are a real expert. Of course, I opted for Japanese because Japan was the most important country at that time in the 60s, late 60s. And so I said difficult language and also an attractive place to go to. So that is how I chose Japanese. But then, of course, Japanese is a one-country language, and not much use was made of the exceptional Japanese that I had. Anyway, these are all stories of the Foreign Service. Each one of us some story. But what are your recollections of Trivandrum?
Well, I have extremely fond recollections of Trivandrum. I was born in the area called Kundumburam, which is behind the Ayurveda College. The house I was born in belonged to my grandfather, S. Neelakantayar, who was a leading lawyer in the city. In fact, he had been elected unopposed to the Legislative Council of Travancore the first time Pattam Thanappillai became Prime Minister, I think. And he had a soaring practice in which my father had joined, and then my father got married to my mother, Sita, who was Mr. Neelakantayar's daughter. So the house where I was born in exists even today in all its glory and beauty, and it is a Chinmaya school in that area. So I have, it was a big house. There was a big compound in front. So my memories as a child growing up are all of a lot of sports activities, football, badminton.
And in the center of the city too, right? Center of the city.
It is in the heart of the city, absolutely heart of the city. And I had a large number of friends in the neighborhood. We got together and organized a Sputnik Sports Club, which would go and have competitions with the others. We would go to the SMV school and play. We would go to my school, which was initially Holy Angels and then St. Joseph's, and play there. I have memories of our wonderful festivals, Onam, Vishu, Shivaratri, when movies would run from early in the morning till late in the night. And I recollect paying 70 paise for a ticket to go and sit in the frontmost row for MGR films, being stampeded by huge crowds. Visits to the museum and the zoo as a child was always a delight. It was a special treat. I think in the Trivandrum Zoo
and the beach.
Is even now. That's right. Visits to Kovalam. That's right, the beach. Though, I guess Kovalam in those days was still considered a little far away. Shankamukam was the more popular destination.
And that has disappeared. The beach itself has disappeared in Shankamukam. You may have noticed.
So I believe because of coastal erosion, and that is very tragic. But I remember going and dipping the feet in the water and eating.
And also the badminton. There was a badminton place.
There was a badminton court. There's a very nice badminton court.
Still there. Still there.
And there's a nice mandapam by the side. So I've often wondered subsequently, when you go to a Western country and you see how people use the beaches, why people in Kerala or people in India go only to wash their feet in the sea, and you don't see them very actively engage in swimming.
No, we don't want to get sun-tanned. So sun-tanning is not a part of our culture.
We also don't know swimming.
To become as fair as possible. So
many people don't know swimming. And I think the sea, at least in that Shangamukam stretch, is a dangerous stretch. I am told it is not like Kovalam, where it is more peaceful and more calm. So all these are wonderful memories. The first time I acquired the Holy Angels Convent was a co-ed school. I was there only till the 4th. But it was a very special school because everyone in my family has studied there. My sister studied there, my brother studied there, my mother studied there. One of the happiest moments my mother had after she turned 80 was when I took her back to Thiruvananthapuram and took her to see Holy Angels, and we took some pictures from the front of the school. So the whole family has gone to Holy Angels. And then I moved on to St. Joseph's, which is next door near the General Hospital. And the highlight of my life in St. Joseph's was the fact that my father bought me a bicycle, a BSA bicycle from a shop on the main road near Tambanur Junction. And every day, initially the Holy Angels days, I would walk with my sister from home to school through Vanchiur, through the district court area, up the hill towards Holy Angels Convent. And subsequently, with the acquisition of a bicycle, I started cycling every day to school, and I was so sort of fascinated with the joy of cycling that I would never come home straight. After school, I would try and go from St. Joseph's to Senate Hall, from there go to Palayam Junction, from there cross University College and look at this big college and imagine, will I ever get to study here once? That is the college where my father studied, where my mother studied. And then I would make my way back. I remember from Statue Junction, it is such a steep road downwards. That it's very fun to cycle.
You rode the cycle.
That's right. You don't have to pedal. Coming up is difficult, but if you go the other way around,
you don't have
then
to.
You just go down fast.
No, but that's the disadvantage in Trivandrum with cycles. It's not like Netherlands where you can ride cycles anywhere, which I believe you did. Anyway, so the Foreign Service early part we'll leave out. Maybe the more significant jobs you did first was the Special Assistant to the Foreign Minister. Then you are in Dubai. Then you were the Finance Ministry, then with the President Pranab Mukherjee, then Netherlands. But more than others like me, you have done fewer postings abroad because you seem to have spent more time in headquarters. Is that true?
Well, I followed the general norm of 2 postings outside and 1 in the country. But my last stint in Delhi, because I worked for President Mukherjee and I virtually spent his entire term with him, which was 5 years. And prior to that, I had also done a 2-year stint in the finance ministry. So that became a fairly long stretch of 7 years. Otherwise,
so normally you would have had 2 more postings if you had not done that.
Yeah, if I had left Delhi quickly, I could have 1 for sure, if not maybe 2.
Right. So let us start at the end. So Netherlands, of course, you became very popular in Kerala because you were helping us out to get out of the floods. Tell us about that experience.
Well, not just the floods. I'm particularly proud of my stint in the Netherlands because I think I have contributed towards concrete change on the ground within India. Especially in the state of Kerala. And the state of Kerala is not just because I was a Malayali sitting there, but because I got very good support from the Kerala state government. And they were willing to accept my recommendations and they were willing to follow up on a large number of suggestions that I made. You mentioned the floods. And indeed, I think often, let me, as a preface, also mention that often for us in the Foreign Service, we talk a lot, we agree on many things, we sign many documents and MOUs and agreements, but many of them don't get implemented. They remain in paper, they rarely get followed up. And rarely do you have a chance to see the results of that progress on the ground in any part of India. And in the initial days, the states used to be far away from foreign policy making and implementation. Now they are much closer and there is an emphasis on more cooperation and more involvement of the states in foreign relations. But that is still at a beginning stage. So to come back to Kerala, what happened was when the floods of 2018, the biggest in 100 years, happened, I was sitting in Netherlands, which is considered the world leader in water management. And immediately the thought came to me as to what I could do and how I could contribute to bring the lessons of Netherlands to Kerala and to India. And in what manner can we prevent such floods, not only in Kerala, but in all parts of India. Therefore, I initiated a discussion with the Foreign Ministry and with the state government, through which we put in a formal request for technical assistance. Normally, Indian government does not accept foreign assistance for however big natural disaster be in India. But technical assistance is permitted on a case-to-case basis. And we sought technical assistance from the Dutch. And the Dutch, there were 2 teams which came. First, a team came as part of a World Bank team, World Bank UNDP team, to assess the disaster and to make some initial recommendations. And then we followed it up with another expert team which came from the Netherlands and which worked with experts in Kerala and formulated detailed recommendations on what they could do vis-a-vis the water sector, and in particular for the Kuttanad region, which is below the sea level and which is very similar to the Netherlands. And subsequently, I was able to persuade the Chief Minister of Kerala to conduct a follow-up visit to the Netherlands. And through his interactions with the Dutch leadership, with Dutch companies, by seeing what they do, we reached a situation where the Kerala government implemented a Dutch model Room for the River project with World Bank assistance. That project is even now under implementation, and all the recommendations by the Dutch experts are before the government and in various stages of consideration and implementation.
But has anything really changed as of now? Or these are all still plans?
Well, the size and scale of our problems are so huge that they cannot change overnight. But what is most important is that a mindset changes. We in India are very used to ad hoc solutions. When there's a crisis, we only look at how to handle that crisis in the short term. We don't see how we build long-term resilience. And that is where ideas like the Room for the River and all this interaction between Dutch experts and policymakers and experts in Kerala come in very handy. I need to mention here in this context that something which I followed up with in conjunction with all these efforts is also to write a book called What We Can Learn from the Dutch, Rebuilding Kerala Post-Floods 2018. And that book was translated into Malayalam and recently released by the Chief Minister at a function in which the leader of opposition also participated and former Chief Minister Oommen Chandy was present. So this book is also part of the awareness raising exercise. And throughout
after the time it ends with a book, like my experiments with education. What is left of is only a book, because very often many of these recommendations are never carried through. That is unfortunate. But at least you can have the book to show to the new generation that you did this. But you also mentioned the relationship between states and the center on foreign policy. This has turned out to be a double-edged weapon, as you may have seen. For example, there was this glorious example of the ruler of Sharjah coming here and announcing release of Indian prisoners, not only Kerala prisoners. And it was considered a great success. But within months, when the question of receiving of assistance from the Gulf region came, it became a conflict between the center and the state. So this experiment of involving states in central affairs or in foreign affairs has not worked very well. And I hope at least in this case, since it's purely humanitarian, that will work, because it depends on your successor, it depends on the successor government. So it's very difficult for these things to be carried through for a longish period. But let's hope it works.
Yeah. Well, I think institutionalization has always been a weakness for us in all our policy making. Often they are individually driven. And as you say, when a government changes, when one officer is replaced by another officer, often good initiatives started by that officer collapse and are not followed through.
Then they write a new book, which is already reinventing the wheel. But anyway, I'm not trying to discourage you, but that is unfortunately.
If I could just speak very quickly and say that, the contribution to the floods, to flood management in India with Dutch expertise, which I was able to bring about and which I hope will continue in the long run, is something I'm very proud of. Similarly, in the field of agriculture, we have been able to, for long years, a center of excellence in flowers and vegetables had been sanctioned for Kerala but not implemented. So with great effort and follow-up with the state government, such a center was opened in Wayanad a few months back with the Central Agriculture Minister and the State Chief Minister and Secretary General of the Dutch Minister of Agriculture participating in that. And that center, I hope, will be a permanent center and will provide lasting benefit to the farmers of the state as well as the farmers of neighboring states. And the third instance I want to mention is, it is little known that the best information regarding 17th century Kerala is locked up in records, which have not been translated, which have not been studied, about which people have very little knowledge about. So one big thrust I had during my tenure in the Netherlands was to have an agreement concluded between the Dutch National Archives and our Kerala State Archives, first of all, to digitize all the records available in Kerala, particularly in the Ernakulam archives, and put them up on the net. And second, as a follow-up to that digitization, start a 7-year project called Cosmos Malabaricus, wherein young scholars from India and young scholars from the Netherlands will come together. Indian scholars will learn classical Dutch, 17th century Dutch, how to read these archives. Dutch scholars will come and live in Kerala and understand from other sources, whether it is local sources or Portuguese or British or French, what additional information is available, and then to bring out a series of publications on 17th century Kerala. So this is going to be a very important and a unique initiative because this information is simply not available to us today. But it is within our reach if we can conclude and implement this project.
But all this did not cause any problems for you, because I'm asking this because once when there was a Kerala initiative for export, I don't know what name it was, some kind of a exhibition. The Kerala government wrote to the Ministry of External Affairs suggesting that all Kerala ambassadors in different parts of the world could be invited. And the Ministry of External Affairs did not allow that. They said, we do not want your own ambassadors to be taking special interest in Kerala. I hope that was not the policy when you were there, and that is welcome. That's a welcome development.
The central government has been fairly schizophrenic about it. I am aware that used to be the policy once upon a time. But now, in contrast, when they have annual ambassadors conferences, they have been asking people to adopt states, go to the states and to meet people. So the fact that Prime Minister Modi was formerly Chief Minister of Gujarat, I think has a big role to play in the rising importance of states within the foreign policy firmament, but it is not intrinsic to the foreign ministry. It is not part of their culture. But I
think it is after the flood relief offered by UAE, the whole thing is somewhat subdued now.
Again, it has been set back. It
has to be brought back. But anyway, fortunately, your time was not. There was no prejudice against somebody taking interest in your own state. That is a good thing. But the most important thing they have done is to work with the president. So let us hear something about that.
Well, the service with President Mukherjee was an absolutely fascinating period in my life. President Mukherjee, as you would very well know, and I'm sure you knew him personally, is truly one of the greatest statesmen that our country has produced. There are few who match him, who used to match him in experience and in the variety of both political tasks as well as administrative ministerial tasks that he has performed. He was a scholar politician. He loved reading, unlike most other politicians. He would always have 2-3 books with him. He was a walking encyclopedia. It is amazing how he would remember facts and figures. He knew to the minutest detail what was the budget, what amount was provided for in the first budget of India, the second budget of India, what was there on the revenue account, what was there on the capital account. He had a great memory for dates and for numbers. He knew by heart the results of parliament, successive parliament elections. And beyond this walking encyclopedia aspect of his personality, he was always known in Indian politics as a consensus builder. He had friends across the spectrum.
Though unfortunately, towards the end, he was somewhat discontented about how he was treated. And that is coming out in all the books. Even after you left, a volume has come out, which reveals...
I know, a volume has come out after I left. So since it is after his death and he's not there to corroborate or contradict it, I think we must take it with a pinch of salt. I have not read it. I've only seen newspaper reports of it.
In the family itself, there has been some difference of opinion on that.
So the son and daughter
published or not.
Had a disagreement. But having worked closely with him for 5 years, I know that it is not his character to publicly criticize anyone, even if they have not been kind to him or they have been unjust to him. I have asked him many times. The most popular saying about Pranab Mukherjee has been that he has been the best prime minister that we never had.
Which he also believed that. No, but that is the sad part for a person to rise to the level of the president and still nurse grievances about one way or the other. He was not treated well.
No, sir, that is the point I'm trying to make. In the sense that he accepted it as, or rather, he did not see him as unfit for the job of prime ministership at any point, but he never harbored a grudge. I have not seen him utter one bad word against Dr. Manmohan Singh. He was always highly respectful of Dr. Manmohan Singh, and he would speak great volumes about Dr. Manmohan Singh's qualities as an economist and integrity as an individual. He would always say Dr. Manmohan Singh was not a conventional politician. He had no ego hassles in working under Dr. Manmohan Singh, and that is something I have seen even as an official in the finance ministry, where things that the finance minister could decide, he would insist, no, let it go to the prime minister. Let us get the prime minister also to see this and to agree upon this. And with the Gandhi family, once again, while much has been talked about, I have really, and he himself disagreed with Rajiv Gandhi. Rajiv Gandhi dropped him from the cabinet. He left the party, started a different party. He describes it as an unqualified disaster. And he said, that is when I discovered that I'm not a mass leader. and it is not within my ability to create a party. So he came back to the Congress, and then he was rehabilitated in the Congress. His life has been full of ups and downs, but the constant refrain was, this country has given me far more than I have given to this country. So I have no cause for complaint.
That is very rare. Most people think that they are given to the country more than the country deserves.
And if you look at, and he always talks, if you look at the background from which he came, it is truly amazing that someone who grew up in a village in North Bengal, he is not your Calcutta type. He's not Presidency College or the elite schools of Calcutta. He grew up in a small village in North Bengal. He used to walk to school, and he had to walk through paddy fields, and he talks about how he would take off his uniform, wear a little, what they call a gamcha or a little towel around him, cross through sort of pools of water,
and change
the other side, towel himself, put on the clothes, and then continue to school. He started life as a college teacher, and he would cycle every day to school. So from those beginnings to reach the highest office in our country, to be foreign minister, defense minister, commerce minister, finance minister, vice chairman planning commission, truly reflects the greatness of Indian democracy, of from where to where people can go.
Yes, of course, but Mr. Narayanan,
different more from him.
Mr. Narayanan is another example. Dr. Abdul Kalam is another example. They're all from very humble origins. Anyway,
so we can be proud of that.
But when you were with Yashwant Sinha, when he was foreign minister, what was it like?
Again, an absolutely fascinating experience. I never...
He was an IAS officer, wasn't he?
That's right. He was an IAS officer who had joined politics. And I have to say that, okay, let me come to that later. But first of all, it was a wonderful experience. I did not know Mr. Yashwant Sinha from Adam. I did not know why I was picked, how I was picked. But I was told, the foreign secretary called me and said, we have decided to make you director in the External Affairs Minister's office. And when I went and met him, that is the first time I met him. And I recall he was rushing off to the parliament, and he said, come with me. And so I went into the car, and by then the standard practice with him was he would always have 2-3 flunkies traveling in the car with him. And he would sit in a seat in front, and the flunkies would all fill up at the back. But because he had asked me to come along, the flunkies had already got into the car, and he realized there was no place for me to sit, and it was not appropriate that I sit with them as a senior foreign service officer. So the first thing he said was, told all of them to come out of the car. He said one can sit in front, and he and I sat at the back. And he told the other guys, you reach the parliament on your own. So he was a man of great courtesy, great respect towards officers. He was a Babu in the finest traditions. I think he had been brought up in a highly educated family. His wife is a writer of children's literature. His children all went to the IITs and to the best business schools. One of them is a member of parliament, former minister. So he comes from the best traditions of Indian bureaucracy as well as civilized conduct in politics. His mentor was Chandrasekhar. He was associated with the socialist movement, and that is when he quit the government overnight and joined politics. So it was
when he was a bureaucrat. Even at that time, it was fascinating the way he conducted himself, and very polished and very civilized and all that. Of course, later I met him as when he became minister. So you have had so much of interaction with politicians.
Correct. One newspaper journalist once from Bihar conducted an interview of him, and I was sitting in, and he asked a fascinating question. And this refers to a story in Yashwant Sinha's life. It is said that when he was a young district collector, some politician was annoyed with him and started abusing him and ordering him around. And Yashwant Sinha, as a young IAS officer, told the politician, look, I can be you any day. You will in your entire life never become a
But then every bureaucrat seems to, expect to become a politician also. So, and that has become very common these days. It was not used to be the case. But do you have any such ambitions?
Well, not exactly. I think politics is one amongst many avenues which is available to any individual to serve the country, to serve society, and to serve your fellow people. I'm certainly, I think 60 is an age too early to retire in many ways. I'm more than full of energy and enthusiasm to start a new innings, but exactly what that new innings should be and how I should spend it or what I should engage in, I'm still in a process of thinking and reflecting. I would like to lead an active life, but I'm contemplating in what avenue and in what manner I should go forward next.
But this is the time so many new names are coming into politics. Mr. Sridharan has just announced that he would join BJP. Many comedians are joining the Congress party. so everybody has a field day at this point. So I hope you are also in the area of consideration. I think Murali Tumarukuti's name also has come out today. So people are, and they don't seem to be very particular as to which party they should go into. That seems to be rather open. So that shows that you don't need to have a party to yourself or a principle to yourself. You can it's always flexible.
Well, I don't know. But I have to say that even today I was told that by a journalist that the latest story is sort of the left front is thinking of offering me Ernakulam seat to contest as an independent, while the UDF is considering me for Trivandrum. So I find this amusing, but in a way I'm happy that both sides find me acceptable and respectable and somebody who can contribute to the state in general.
Oh, that's a tribute to your personality and your abilities. There's no question about that.
No, but I want to challenge
something different because
I want to challenge what you said earlier, because I think it is important to have convictions. I think it is important to have ideals, and I think there is a lot of.
What I'm saying is the trend is not that at the moment.
That is true. But as far as I am concerned, I think to an extent my involvement in public life also comes from a sense of anguish over so much which is going wrong within our country as well as internationally. Thank God the Americans have brought back Joe Biden. We all know how disruptive President Trump's tenure was, not just to the US, but for the entire world. And similarly, even for us in India, the rosy dreams of our early independence generation, or even the let me say the Manmohan Singh days of economic reform and regular steady progress are no longer there. Today, we are a highly divided society. We are a polarized society. Freedom of speech seems to be under threat in many ways. A 21-year-old girl is arrested because she chose to support Greta Thunberg with a Google document toolkit. So lots of things. Our farmers' agitation has been going on for so long without resolution. The pandemic, COVID, continues to rage across the country without solution. In Kerala, we did extraordinarily well in the initial phase, but now we have become one of the worst performers in our country. So we as a country remain in a stage where, while we have much to be proud of, we still have miles to go before we sleep. There is so much more that needs to be done and so much better that we need to do just to fulfill our own potential and to live up to the ideals that our founding fathers have enshrined in our constitution.
But the only response I can give is that people do change. People do join politics with all kinds of idealistic ideas. And I have seen with my own eyes how people change and bring out certain attributes which you never saw when they were before in politics. So there's a certain political culture which would be very difficult to resist. And I'm not suggesting that it will happen to you, but it has happened to many people.
No, I agree. I'm not, what should I say? I do not underestimate the challenges in trying to make change. But if we look at our society, there are so many people who have made change. You may mention Sridharan, and Sridharan is a wonderful example of a change agent. Think of Mahatma Gandhi and the kind of odds he faced every stage of his career, at every moment in his life. When he called off the non-cooperation movement over Chauri Chaura, did he dream of India becoming independent at all? Did his people around him dream of India becoming independent? So there are people who have stood steadfast on their convictions and have made change possible, but it is a very tough struggle, I agree, and it requires a lot of resoluteness, a lot of character, a lot of determination, a lot of patience.
And also, politics is a gamble in many ways. There is no guarantee that you can win a seat or you can become a responsible position. That's not possible. Because if everybody could become a minister, we would all join politics. But it has not happened. I know how many people in Delhi from Foreign Service itself has played around with possibilities of elections, etc. But there is a certain security that you want. And that becomes difficult when you are in a political pursuit. But the famous saying that if you don't join politics, you will be ruled by the people who are not capable of doing it. That is the statement. So if you don't want to be ruled by the incompetent, you should jump into politics. That is a philosophy that should bear in mind.
Well, at least not just with politics, but with everything. The approach I am taking, what I'm telling myself is, you may not be able to change everything. You may not be able to change the world. You may not be able to change how politicians and political parties or our particular kind of democratic system functions. But maybe you can make a difference. At least if you are able to make some difference in one small area to one segment of people, if you are able to make their lives better, you would still lead a happier life than if you did not attempt to do it at all.
No, but let's be frank, nobody joins politics without seeking power. If anybody says, I'm not seeking power, that is hypocrisy. Because politics is all about seeking power through democracy. And there is nothing wrong in that. But to say that I'm joining politics just to serve the nation, that is not a very, like when we say in the UPSC, we are asked, why are you joining the Foreign Service? You serve the nation. Well, you could be a sweeper, you might serve the nation better. So that debate is totally unnecessary.
No, I'm not saying power is not important, nor that one should not seek power. But what I'm saying is that the purpose of power should not be self-aggrandizement. Purpose of power should be to transform lives around you, to transform the way our society functions, to transform the way government functions, to make it more compassionate, to make it more efficient, to make it something which meets the needs of our people.
But that is the principle that everyone holds. You see, everyone begins like that. And that is why I'm saying that it's not so easy to remain consistent and constantly with that reputation. Because there is so much of things happening in the Foreign Service itself. If you complete 37 years and come back home, that's a great achievement, even if nothing else has happened. So similarly in politics also, if you are able to even survive and stand the pressures, that itself will be a great achievement.
For one day. Not 37 years.
Well, this is a very good decision that you have taken to come back, whatever future may hold for you. But considering your commitment, your abilities, your willingness to serve, and your acceptability for more than one party, I think this will all play very well in your favor. But wish you all the very best. And I am from Trivandrum. I have one vote, which I'm sure you will be able to get.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. More than anything else, I count upon your blessings and your guidance. You have always been a wonderful mentor to me, a friend, philosopher, and guide. And I look forward to remaining in close touch with you in the coming days.
Absolutely. It will be a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Namaste.